Thank you very much, Brian, for the awesome introduction. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here and just to chat about what Wasp is, what DSLs are, how they tie in together, how it goes together with web development. So yeah, really appreciate the invitation to come here and just chat about this. So yeah, just super shortly, we'll see what the DSLs are, in general, then why they are cool and important, and how they can be applied to web development. And kind of the result is Wasp. So we'll see what are the pros of this approach and why we are super excited about what we are doing with it. So yeah, to cut everything short, we can just dive into it. So let's start with the first question. So first question, before everything is, what is a DSL? When we started working on Wasp, we often, we called it, hey, this is a DSL for web development. It's a new language we are working on, but it's not like a general language. It's a DSL. So I think a fair amount of people, they know what a DSL is, but again, it's not a common word, like I don't know, like JSON or like HTML that everybody who is in the world of web or development is aware of. So it's not that common term as you expected, and we were actually getting a lot of questions. I don't know what a DSL is. Why is this helpful? How do we even? People were generally kind of asking, how does a new language fit into web development? So I think it's super useful to see what a DSL is and how it is used today in all the different domains. So I think it's very interesting that you are probably using DSLs every day, even if you weren't familiar with the term. So, for example, some of the super familiar DSLs are HTML. So you use HTML for writing your layout in websites, web pages. Then another example, very mainstream, is SQL. So SQL is a DSL, and I mean, before we go on, DSL is a domain-specific language. So it means it's a language, but again, it's not a general programming language like C++, Java, Python, or JavaScript, which means it's Turing complete. You can do whatever you want with it. You can kind of cover any domain, from databases to I don't know, like police stations, or like kind of any domain you can cover it with Python, of course. But domain-specific languages, they are built for one kind of one purpose only. So it's typically something like it's very specialized for something which it does very well, but you can't use it for everything. So as I said, like one cool example is the HTML, which many of us use every day, similar for SQL, or if you use any kind of ORM, it's probably SQL running underneath that. Then again, CSS, very useful, like little language DSL that we all use very often. Interesting one is regex, so regular expressions. Although it looks weird, it actually works wonders, and it can help a lot when you're kind of trying to design some validation rules, or how should something look like. So that's also kind of a very good example of a DSL. And yeah, finally, I mean, there is Terraform, kind of one of the newer ones, which is very helpful when you are dealing with deployments, infrastructure, and similar. So again, it's not like a tool to solve everything, but it actually gives you a very concise way to describe your architecture in a declarative way. So you'll see more about declarative stuff, but I think very often, although it doesn't have to be by nature, but very often DSLs are declarative, which means they're kind of super easy to write, super easy to understand, and that's one of the main benefits, why they even exist. So let's dive a bit deeper into that. So why would anyone make a DSL when you can just use your JavaScript or Python or C++? So why do you bother? So here are a couple of main benefits of a DSL. So as I mentioned, since they're highly specialized and they cover one specific domain like SQL or HTML, actually the authors of that language, they can tailor the whole experience, the code, they can tailor it only to that specific need. So, like HTML doesn't have any boilerplate really, it's only like you have span, div, there is no like extra parentheses or calling functions in JavaScript and similar. It's super clean. You can easily read it and you know exactly what it does. And, in the end, the final result is there is less code. If you're just kind of chaining functions in JavaScript, designing your kind of layout tree, which actually kind of is, if you're using JSX in React, then if you strip down the JSX magic, you would actually do just that. You would call functions in JavaScript, which will build your layout tree. So that's not as nice. So this is also why JSX was invented in the end, that you still get that feeling of a kind of DSL that you are using. So that's one thing. It is just super tailored, super focused, and the end result is just less code, easier to read, easier to write. On the other hand, what is very interesting with DSLs, they are pretty much agnostic. They're much closer to the domain itself than to the implementation, kind of like the workings that are happening behind under the hood of that language. So for example, SQL is a pretty good example. It hasn't changed that much in the last 30 or even 50 years. Like it has the same structure, reads very similarly. Of course, there are changes, but much less compared to maybe some languages. Like we moved from Java, PHP, to JavaScript and new versions. Like we have huge changes here. But on the other hand, SQL is always here. It's kind of always the same. So that's the main benefit of DSLs. The more they are kind of tied to the domain they're solving, and they're not addressing particular implementation details, they will actually stay the same, because the domain changes much slower than the implementation. You have your tables, you have the way you want to get your data out of the tables, and as long as that's true, your language is going to stay the same. It's not concerned like do you use signals, or do you use hooks, or do you use something else for that. So that's one of the big benefits. It can be agnostic both to the architecture, infrastructure, implementation, language in which we are using underneath. So that's kind of one of the big things. And I mean, this is the last one is actually declarative. What I mentioned, like very often domain specific languages are very declarative, which means they even don't have maybe for loops or even variables. It is just kind of specification. It reads like you are just like specifying configuration of your infrastructure, or your calls to the database or similar. So that's kind of something that we are going to see a bit more later about. But just the fact is, the more language is declarative and more similar, to just kind of explaining how something works, and what rather than how, then it's going to be easier for this new generation of solutions like GPT, because it's just much less code and it's much easier to digest. We were testing out the Wasp. That was kind of discovery with GPT, and even that GPT was not trained in Wasp itself. Just because Wasp language is so simple and so easy to read, almost like English. In the fact, it was like a really good result. It could produce more, just more code, and needed less code as an input. So we'll see a bit more about that in the later. But that's something that I thought was just interesting to highlight. Okay, so now we have seen why DSLs are a good idea. We can also, I think it's a fair question to see why they might not be a good idea, because there's always two sides to every coin. So I just wanted to cover that as well. So I mean, one of a big fact here is you are developing a new language, sort of. Maybe it's not a new C++ or new JavaScript, but still it's a new language. Maybe it's now .tf or like Terraform or .wasp or similar. So that's a new thing. It means you need a new tooling for it. So there is kind of much more work to get it started off the ground for developers of that language than if they were just doing kind of library calls in JavaScript or something similar. So I think that's one thing to consider. And the main question is the domain that you are applying that language to, is it worth it? Is there enough moat in it that you actually need and want to address with that language? So in the end, I would say if yes, if it's kind of rich domain, you can address a lot of problems, get rid of a lot of a boilerplate, then it's worth it. It's worth it. And maybe some developers who are developing the language, they will have to introduce, they will just have to invest more work into getting all the tooling and everything, just working, with editors. Although it's becoming easier and easier with introductions of stuff like LSP, and VS Code has like very nice plugin system and similar, but still it's more work considered, than just using existing language. So, but again, I would say that's something that every DSL developer has to weigh and see. But that's kind of the main question when deciding should you do a DSL or not. Okay, awesome. And yeah, I mean, now with that, I would like to go on the use case of Wasp, which is something that we are building, and kind of explain. I mean, this already gave some motivation, but I would just like to explain, kind of what motivated us to do it, what's happening right now, and why we believe that DSL approach is helpful in the domain of web development. Okay, so let's get right into it. So first of all, why we even decided to work on Wasp, a new language for for developing full stack web apps. Also, just to mention that. So my co-founder is my twin brother, actually, Martin, and we have both been developers for the last 15 years. So I mean, we never considered ourselves to be web developers, like specifically. We were just kind of general developers. We worked, on university. We were doing some machine learning, even like a lot of bioinformatics, algorithms, and similar. And that was kind of our main interest. Kind of do some of this kind of more maybe low level stuff. But funnily enough, on every project that we worked on the side or as a startup or just helping somebody out, we always naturally had to build out web application, because that was mostly the main way of delivering your solution to the end user. So we actually got a lot of exposure to web development. So just remembering now, we started with PHP on the back end, and we were using, I think, some framework like XJS on the front end. Then we kind of progressed to jQuery. Then it was Java on the back end, then Backbone. Then Martin used to work in Palantir and Google as an intern, so he kind of discovered Angular there. So that was, at the advent of SPAs. So we switched to Angular and Node, and finally, kind of our stack was React and Node.js. So that's kind of what we have been using for the last couple of years. So I mean, I just said all that just to show that we have gone through a lot of technologies and a lot of stacks, from Pern, Mean, Mern, and whatever, Lamp even, right? So our main motivation for Wasp was that we were missing. It was kind of hard to move from stack to stack, and it was happening very fast. So we will build one project with Angular, for example. We just learned Angular, we know how to use it, we got some best practices. But then, next thing you know, now React is the hot thing. So you have to leave everything, and the client they don't want to use Angular anymore. They want to use React because that is the sexy thing now. So like oftentimes we had to drop what we know and just go and learn the new latest stack. And it felt like we spent more time on just relearning how to do the same thing now in the new stack. Because it's always kind of similar for this type of typical SaaS applications. You have your auth, you have your resources, there is some interaction, a database, you have state which is floating around. So we just felt that every time we needed to build a new application from start, a new project, we were battling a lot of complexity. We had to learn, Redux, then React query, then something. So it always felt like we are just, it looks outside the same from the outside, but we always have to figure out the latest technology on how to actually make that happen. So our main motivation was then, we see that stuff is changing a lot and so quickly. And we told ourselves, like, look, I mean, we feel like this this domain is actually mature enough that we can see the patterns in all kind of these SaaS like applications. There are some common patterns, and we wonder, is it possible to capture these in a more abstract way? So we don't ever have to deal with implementing auth again, or implementing kind of this CRUD API which you have to do every time. So those are the questions we had. And this was the problem, the pain we felt ourselves and wanted to solve. So this is just like a little illustration. When I was kind of trying to discover if other people also feel that pain, it was just enough to type why is web dev in Google, and you will get boring, hard, complicated. It's kind of like all developers are fed up with the complexity. So that was our main motivation for Wasp. So yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, like the goals were to write much less boilerplate. As I mentioned, there is a lot of this kind of CRUD work that you have to do for every project. Like with the API sharing state on the front end, the back end, authentication, all the typical kind of resource management. That's one thing. On another thing, this is just kind of relearning all the best practices for every new stack. So, I mean, for example, when we started using React, it was popular, of course, it was used, but still, all the best practices haven't been figured out yet. So even the community wasn't yet set on what is the best way to do, state management, or what is the best way to do, like authentication or something. So, we were spending a lot of time, just, asking questions on Stack Overflow, forums, Googling around, just to discover there actually is no best practice defined yet. So that's another thing, like we just want to, so I mean, any framework is opinionated, but we want to be opinionated in a way and, say, hey, like we did the discovery for you, and, this is the best way to solve X. And, we give you the best practices for all the common things you might need in your application, and that works out of the box. That's something that we want for ourselves. And this is also what we wanted to embed in Wasp. And finally, I think main thing for us was we did not want to just throw React and everything else, or in trash, and say, hey, we are building a new language, forget everything you knew, now you're going to do everything in Wasp. We kind of knew it just wasn't possible, and React is great at what it does, and Node is great at what it does. So our goal was never to replace any of the existing languages and frameworks. Rather, we just wanted to kind of work together with them and take care of the hard parts, boring parts, and still let developers use their favorite technologies. So that was our intention from the day zero. We don't want to reinvent everything the wheel from the start. We just want to give you an easy layer to get best practices out of the box, and you can still write your code in your favorite tech, which is right now React and Node.js. Okay, awesome. So let's move on. And yeah, status of Wasp right now. So we are in beta. We have been in beta since December 2022, and we had a couple of thousand projects created so far, hundreds of unique deployments, and I will also share some examples of applications in production. And also, we just recently had the first startup which was actually made it Wasp and even acquired. That was kind of a big milestone for Wasp. Actually somebody built a startup and so somebody acquired it and they keep working on it. That was super exciting to see. So I would say we are in beta. It's quite stable. People use it for all kinds of projects like MVPs, side projects, SaaS, just typical SaaS solutions. So I would say don't use it for some super heavy production yet, but you are free to use it for your kind of or personal or kind of, let's say, side project, or even just your kind of your own business stuff. We are adding more features every day, and we also share a little bit more about that going forward. Awesome. And yeah, just a couple of examples of what kind of application you can build with Wasp. So for example, GPT was very popular lately. So so we had our template for building your SaaS with GPT integration. So here's one application which is pretty popular. You just type in your job title, company, and upload your CV, and it generates your cover letter for you with GPT. Another one was like a bit more enterprise sassy. So it was Asana for lawyers, as the author named it. So pretty much you can just imagine like a workflow manager for lawyers who use it in their kind of workflows. So that was pretty cool to see implemented. It has like a lot of moving parts, from calendars, assigning people, file upload. So all the stuff that you could imagine in kind of, let's say, rich SaaS, it was actually used here. Also, like another GPT example, helps you find kind of helps you apply to the college, find a college grant and similar. So we had a bunch of these GPT powered solutions lately. But yeah, pretty much I would say for any kind of SaaS application, so something which is not pure content like presentational site, so just maybe your blog, it's probably something that you want to log in, you have some database backed resources, and it can be either like a marketplace, SaaS, so whatever you can imagine in terms of these typical business applications. Awesome. Shortly about the team. So this is currently the team. There is 5 of us. As I said, like the project was started by me and my twin brother Martin, and then we also got joined by a couple of great engineers who are developing a lot of cool features with us every day. Shortly about the company, we were started about 2 years ago as open source project, and then we were entered by Combinator and got funded with them, and also got the seed round afterwards. And so that's basically what is giving us funds to keep working on Wasp until we reach 1.0 and start introducing enterprise features and similar which can be monetized. And yeah, like we are a small team still, but we have a bunch of contributors since everything is open source. So it's just super exciting to work on this project every day. And yeah, I mean the whole team has experiences from both smaller companies and bigger companies, like you can see here. So it was just like a very good match of different profiles that could just feed their knowledge and experiences into making a Wasp. Awesome. So now that I have given you an intro, let's actually have a bit of a deep dive in how Wasp works and how it can help you with web development. Awesome. Okay, so very shortly, what is happening in Wasp? The first step is that you get to describe your high-level features of your application in our language, Wasp DSL. And those high-level features are, stuff which is typical for any web application. So authentication, routing, you describe your data models, then your queries, actions. You can have async jobs, and now even sending emails, WebSockets. So all the typical concepts that you could imagine in the context of web application, WASP probably supports it. And if not yet, we'll support it in the future. And right now, as I said, Wasp works with React, Node.js, and Prisma. So this is what we use for client, backend server, and database. So you get to write your code in that. And finally, what's happening under the hood? Everything is compiled to pure React and Node.js application. I think we also have a diagram which is showing it here. You'll see it later. But yeah, so there is no magic in the end. Like when you deploy your application, you just get like a pure React Node.js application, so it can work on any deployment platform. And the performance is, it's not affected by Wasp in any way, because Wasp is just, a compiler which from your specification and your Wasp declarations creates the finally React and Node.js application. Awesome. So just to show you a bit of how it looks like when you use it. So as I mentioned, Wasp is a language, but it's a very simple one. So you can imagine it, let's say, like a bit nicer and smarter JSON. We just often say that Wasp is a configuration language, which in fact it is. So yeah, what it happens, you start with saying, I have my app to do app. It's going to have some title, and then, for example, you get to define authentication block. You want to have full stack code out of the box. So you can say, hey, I want Google, I want GitHub, username, password, email, and just by defining those couple of things, you get everything sorted out for you, both on the back end, front end. You even get the already ready components for you to plug in, which we are going to see later. So so we just try to make your life as easy as possible with this. And similarly, you just have routing. You can define your pages, and this is interesting. So for example, this is how you plug in into your React code. So you say, look, I have my page, and like the root component of this page is going to be this component from React, and then basically you just go to React file and just type your React logic there. So that is the kind of connection you can see. We have the same for front end and for defining queries and actions or mutations on the backend. So we'll also see that a bit later. This is now the kind of framework, the workflow, how it looks diagram under the hood. So what's happening is that you have your Wasp file, which has the basic high-level configuration of your web application, and then you have your specific logic, as I mentioned, in JSX or TypeScript, TSX, whatever you want to use. So all of that gets fed into our Wasp compiler, and what happens under the hood is you get full application in React, Node.js. You can get artifacts for deployment. Of course, you can integrate with Tailwind or anything that you want to use. So you can use any npm package you want. So it's fully compatible with your kind of typical workflow of web development. So it also works. We have our own CLI, which makes things easier. So basically, all you have to do is just run Wasp new, and you immediately can create a new project, get everything set up for you, and then you can just run Wasp start, which will immediately do like start backend, start front end. So it's only one command to get even database. Even database, we have a kind of command to get that running. So we take care of all the typical stuff that you will have to do manually if you're doing typical MERN or Perl stack. So CLI is kind of helpful, gets you running, and kind of covers everything you need during development. It's database migrations, deployment, anything. So as I mentioned, we are using Prisma. Under the hood. Even in front of the hood. So you get access to all of the goodies on Prisma. So you can just anytime you can run Prisma Studio with the PostDB Studio command, and you just get insight into your local database, how it works, how it looks like. You can edit it. So anything that you could do with Prisma, which is quite handy when you're doing kind of debugging and seeing how things work. So we have been adding a lot of features, especially since beta. So I just kind of wanted to highlight a couple of interesting ones. Although we had many more actually just now. So yeah, Wasp fully supports TypeScript. This was one of the most sought after features since we were in alpha, and with beta we introduced TypeScript. We also have a native support for Tailwind, so we even have templates which get set up for you. Now we also support running cron jobs or async jobs as a more general term via Postgres solution or PGBoss. And yeah, we have been doing a lot of work on our Wasp language server. So this is the part I was mentioning. When you have your own DSL, you actually have to provide some tooling, to have all the auto completion, syntax highlighting. So we have been putting more and more work into this lately, and I think we have come quite far. You can also check it out and see it later in action. And yeah, that's it. And yeah, right now, just right now. So what we do every quarter is we do launch week. You might have seen kind of this trend, with other dev tool companies, and we also adopted it. So every quarter, we are going to kind of stop, release what we have, and do a launch week event around it. Just highlighting every new feature every day, and it's kind of like a fun event. Like we always write a lot about what we have done, talk a lot, provide a lot of examples. There's always some swag giveaway. We have hackathon in the end. So right now, the launch week is happening. It's just now. It just started yesterday. So I just invite you to join. Follow us on Wasplang on Twitter, and you will get all the latest, updates, seeing what's new, how you can use it in your, in your applications. Just get the idea of the features which are being shipped right now. We have a bunch of swag waiting for you, so there is always opportunity to win some. So that's also like extra motivation to follow us on the Wasplang. Awesome. And just shortly, before we go into specific example and kind of I show you the code, the goals of Wasplang, short term, mid term, long term. So I mean, lately, kind of with beta, we are in a pretty, I think we covered, let's say, the basics of web frameworks. So something that you would expect in other web frameworks. Now, most likely you already have it in Wasp. So once we sorted this out with beta, we kind of started, polishing, let's say, the whole developer experience. So we are introducing more UI helpers. For example, you'll see like you get generating components for authentication. We have templates, you can use to start with quickly. Do you want to use a GPT template? Do you want to use like embeddings? Do just typical SES? We are trying to provide more and more starter templates for you to get started faster. I mean, midterm, like what's going to be happening next, which actually we are doing right now, is like extending the DSL, the language. So the true power of Wasp is because of the things that DSL understands. So for example, just now we added support for WebSockets in DSL in Wasp. So it's actually again requires much less code and much less boilerplate to get started. So we want to put as much stuff as possible, and being valuable in DSL. So that's something that we are going to be focused on, especially I think especially around data models, because this is one interesting part. And the Wasp is already doing a lot, around reducing the duplication, or between front end, back end, duplicating state and data models. So we are doing a lot of job for you already here. We have like our own type safe RPC, so you don't have to actually type all the endpoints and do all the API calls. But there is much more we could do, with some validations, with some kind of, we can have like some secondary data models that you can use around. So there's a lot of exciting stuff to do here. So that's something that we are going to be looking into probably soon. And yeah, I mean, long term, as I mentioned, one of the main benefits of DSLs like SQL or similar is that they are not married to specific stack or architecture. So this is also something that we are very excited about Wasp, being a solution which can withstand the test of time. It's so in 10 years maybe there's going to be like Preact, whatever is going to be the new cool framework. But we hope that the Wasp part is going to stay the same. You will still have authentication, you will still have your data models, you will still run cron jobs. So that's something we want to make Wasp work kind of with all the major, both front end and backend frameworks. You could even maybe run Python, for example, on the backend. That's something we have been started exploring so far. But in the kind of longer term future, we plan to support, let's say, all the major solutions out there, like Vue on the front end, for example, and similar. So stay tuned for those updates. We have many people asking for Vue. So right now it's just React, but it's not impossible at all to add support for Vue. And yes, as I was mentioning, some of the latest features, from the latest launches. For example, right now when you define your auth, so I want auth with Google and GitHub, and for example email, Wasp will automatically generate the very nice form for you. You can just embed it into your React, and that's it. You can also customize it, of course, with your logo, with your colors and similar. So that's something I have been using a lot when developing Wasp applications, and we have received feedback that people like this kind of, one of the best features to get started off the ground. And I think one cool part that I wanted to highlight to show that kind of odd part in action is that let's say your component for authentication is getting it's regenerated every time you change it. So for example, let's say you had only Google. Right now we have only Google as a method. So all you have to do is just add one line, just say, hey, now I also want to have GitHub as an authentication method. And what's going to happen is basically your application is going to be updated in the same second, because Wasp is going to regenerate the code for you. It's going to see, now you have GitHub that you want to use. So it will update all your components with GitHub button. So, I mean, this is one of the main benefits of why would you want to use a DSL, because it has that kind of understanding. It sees the changes you're doing, and it has control, over the full stack of your application, and it can change stuff instantly for you. So I think, this is not really possible with any other framework out there. And, this is going to be kind of the direction in which we are going to be going, kind of, just to show the value of this. So, it's not scaffolding. It is not just the code that gets spit out and then you have to maintain it yourself. It is actually just one component. You plug it in and it gets regenerated live as you update your code. We will also see it in action. Awesome. And yeah, just to kind of call to action before we go into the code. We are now, in our launch week 3, and it's going on. It's very exciting. So, we have a lot of swag to give out. So, the best way to show us support is to go to GitHub and star our repository on GitHub. That's kind of the best way in open source world to show your support, to kind of show other developers you care about the product, and you just want to support the team. So if you like the product, if you want to support it, please do that. And the first 5 people who star us, starting now, so I'm keeping track of who started so far, they will get some swag of their choice. You can either get a T-shirt of this or this cool beanie if you prefer, or T-shirt like mine. So when you start on GitHub, just take a screenshot of kind of your username on our kind of Stargazer page and tweet it at Wasplang, and I'll see it. So the first 5 I'm going to DM for details to get your swag of choice. Awesome. I think that was everything I had for the presentation. Now we can dive into code a bit. So let me just go around. Okay, cool. I prepared one application specifically today for showing you how it works. Okay, so let's actually go first to see the application. Yeah. So I called it Reflect Daily. So just the other day, I saw one like a popular, Twitter thread, like saying how this one kind of guy, he every day for the last 6 years, he was, he was kind of filling out his diary, and he was asking, what I did well, what I did right. He was doing a little bit of reflection every day on what he was doing. Wait, I will just zoom in this a bit also. Maybe it's going to be more visible. So I like that idea a lot, and there were some typeforms around who were doing the same. But I thought, it would be cool to implement it in Wasp, kind of have your own reflection application. So that's what I started with. So as I mentioned, like the first thing is actually we have our login screen, and I can show it in code right away to you. In the code, oops, there's another code right here. Okay, so now we are going into Wasp. So I will just give you a short rundown of the code. So this is how the code looks like. I mean, we can even hide those hidden files. So everything you have here is your main.wasp file, which has this high-level information. So we can see here which Wasp version is being used. We have the title, which shows up in a tab and similar. And for authentication right now, I'm using username and password. So this is the simplest method. Doesn't require any email or similar. So this is why I chose it. But we could easily add other methods as well. Cool. If something fails, just go back to login page, login route. On the client, we can kind of define the root component, and this is the way to define your npm dependencies. So whatever you want to use from the npm, you can. And okay, we don't have to go through everything right now. I just wanted to actually show you the auth section. So once you have defined this auth section and you said, look, I want to have my username and password method, what's going to happen is that Wasp is this went away. Okay, coming back. So what's going to happen is that Wasp is going to generate a component for you that you can use right away. So when we go into the actual, kind of external code, like your source code, so we have client code, we have server code, Node.js, React, and we have shared folder for anything that you want to share. So let's go into client. So I have my sign up page here and login page. So when we go into, for example, login page, all we need to do to actually use this, get this nice form that you have been seeing right here. So if you want to get this form, all you have to do is import this login form from Wasp auth forms login, and that's it. You get the form. I use Chakra UI here, so this is like my CSS or like styling framework I was using. So I centered it a bit, but all you have to do is just use the form right here, and you can easily change appearance. For example, it has like styling options, so I just I change the brand color, button text, and similar. So that's pretty handy. And yeah, this is the same from sign up page. Like, you have sign up component, you just plug it in, style it, and that's it. So that's it. Let's now try to get in. I already have an account, so it's going to work. Let's see if I remember my password or not. I do. Nice. So now we have our reflection application. So this is super simple. It's almost like a to-do app, but like repurposed a bit for for this purpose. So what's happening? We have our reflection, and every day, at the end of the day, I can go and say, okay, let's see how my day went, and I can choose like, was it -2, -1? Or so there is no zero. That's kind of the trick. Like it either has to be like +1 or -1. Like you have to choose, was it a good day or bad day, and then use that for reflection. So let's say my day was 2, and my win of the day was definitely presenting Wasp at cfe.dev. Wow, I like it. What could have gone better? I don't know. I might have. I'm a bit tired. We can do that. Like, I'm a bit tired. So yeah, I should have slept more. Let's say slept more. Cool. What we do now, we submit it, and it works as we expected. We can see our new entry here. So that's it. We can of course log out. You also get like log out kind of function to use from Wasp. But now let's look at how this works in code a bit. So again, if you go back to our code, so what's happening again? Kind of we always start from the high level stuff, which is defining your app behavior in the Wasp file. So let's say if you want to add a new reflection. So we have our Prisma data model. So this is what I was mentioning. We are using Prisma right here. So this is why we have this PSL special tags, which means the code in between here is going to be Prisma schema language, and this is actually just like a data model in Prisma. So we define our reflection. We have day rating, biggest win, like bad thing that happened, and again, like every reflection is owned by some user, who has username, password, and his own reflections. So that's cool. And now actually, we want to create a new reflection. So I said, okay, I'm going to have an action. So action is like mutation. It's like it's not a we have queries and actions. Query is something that reads from the database, gets you information, and reflection, like action, is something that is going to change some state, or like I don't know, launch rockets, like anything. It's going to kind of be like changing state of the world. So that's why we are calling it action. So by default, every action is by default, authenticated. So you cannot run it if you are not authenticated user. But I just explicitly, made it here so you can see the feature. If you want to have like a route or like action which is public, you can just put false here, and it's going to be accessible to everybody without logging in. So what's happening here, like right here, like we are importing our function from Node, which is going to be doing the work. And finally, this is actually the cool part. So we are saying, hey, this action is going to affect the reflection entity, which means, this action is going to change something, with this data model. And that's interesting because when you have a query which says, hey, I'm reading from reflections. So this is query, and entities in this case means, it's reading from reflections. It means that once you run this action and, for example, create a new reflection, Wasp automatically knows that this query is going to be invalidated. Like like you want to display it on a screen, for example. It knows that this query depends on reflection, so it knows it needs to invalidate the cache. So that that's why we can immediately, when we add a new reflection, I say, hey, hola, new reflection. Okay, I should have restarted the fields here. New reflection. why it's going to appear here without any extra work done by us. Typically, if you were using Redux for something, you would have all this kind of boilerplate that you would have to kind of wire through to get this working. But with Wasp, there is no extra work for you because like we have this concept baked into the language. So yeah, let's take a look. I have my action and I have this function in Node which is doing the work. So if I go to server, because this is a server side function, source server, and I go to my actions. I mean, we can have any structure we want, in those folders. I just use this for convenience right now. So we have our reflection. Okay, cool. We have create reflection, and I mean, right now here I'm using TypeScript, so everything is typed. So you have kind of full type safety from across the stack. If you use tRPC or similar, we actually have our own type safe RPC, and it works in the same way. So once you have your data model reflection or entity, you get it accessible as a type right here, and also here, once you have a query or action, you also get it here to import in your TypeScript code. So we can say, oh, okay, cool. I have my reflection. It has this type, and here we are doing typical Prisma, just invoking like Prisma ORM library, but kind of wrapped into our context. So we are just saying, hey, if this is not authorized person, they won't be able to do this. And on the other hand, you can just kind of run, hey, create new reflection with day, biggest win, bad moment, and user who is creator. So that's it, super simple. I mean, you probably write something very similar if you were doing stuff without Wasp, but this way you get extra superpowers on top. The same goes for queries. When you are reading from the database, again, you get everything typed out. This is get reflections. There is no input, and you get out the array of reflections. Again, if no user, throw error, and then again, calling Prisma's kind of ORM. Give me all the stuff from reflections where user is the user that came here. And that's it. Then also, once you specify that, Wasp is automatically going to generate for you, based on this kind of action and query declaration, you will get immediately functions that you can use on the front end, on the client. So that's the cool part. There is no any API or endpoint definition. You don't have to do like your own GraphQL server or anything. So it's kind of RPC. Like once you define this function, this declaration, and define your server function, we are going to generate the client function you can use right away. Again, with some extra superpowers. So for example, if we go to our main page right here, so what's happening? Okay, I have some auxiliary stuff here, but yeah, on the main page, first thing, you get to call use query. So Wasp is using use query under the hood for all this data reactivity, fetching data. So it is very similar. It is the same interface. So we are just making things a bit simpler, with kind of handling the keys for you and similar. So yeah, all you have to call, you just have to import your. So I have a bunch of stuff from Chakra here, but you just have to import your query. So I have my get reflections from Wasp queries get reflections. This is just the way you have to type it out. And once you call it in this reactive fashion, it's going to be fetched. You have it in your reflections, and then basically, you can just render it. I can render it right here. I have my reflection list. Go to reflections and kind of do the whole thing, right, for each one. So that's it. You get all the reactivity out of the box, and thanks to this kind of thing I showed you with cache auto invalidation, whenever you change something, add new reflection, it's automatically reflected on the screen. Very similar for action. So we have our action create a new reflection, and again, how we use it. I think we have handle submission right here in our form. So again, all we have to do this time is just call this async operation, provide all the arguments, and it's going to create a new and kind of new raw reflection on the backend. And that's it. I was using kind of some components for stylings to make it look nice, but it was quite fast to get it done. I think maybe one more cool thing that I can show. I think we have a bit more of time. Is so let's say I just want to run now. Okay, let me just go with my terminal right here so you can see it and zoom it in. Oops. course. This one, yeah. Okay, let's get it bigger. Okay. So all I have to do is, run. Oh, it's already here. Run Wasp DB Studio, and it's going to run the Prisma Studio for us. So yeah, it's right here. And yeah, I mean, we can even go back. So we can see we have one user right here, Matija. And if you check out reflections, we have a bunch of them. Bam, 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 bam. I mean, also the cool thing is, I mean, this is connected to the user, and Wasp is automatically, when you are doing authentication, Wasp is automatically hashing password for you. So I mean, this is what I mentioned, in like your framework providing the best practices for you. So you don't have to care about the hashing. We picked out the kind of most mainstream algorithm way of doing it, applying salt and similar. So that's the benefit of an opinionated web framework. Awesome. And yeah, I think that's mostly it from what I wanted to show. Let me just check my presentation to finalize things. Oops. And one more, yeah, thank you. Please join our launch week number 3. Follow us on Twitter, and like the biggest thing for us is if you stars on GitHub, then we can give you some swag, and that's going to help us a lot, in supporting our open source project. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks. That was awesome. I will admit I haven't had the chance to check out Wasp before, but I was really impressed. Actually, it's funny. This couple presentations ago, we had somebody from a framework called Streamlit that in some ways that remind me a little bit of like they were gearing specifically towards a Python stack, whereas this is more like a a JavaScript stack at the moment. But similar in terms of like just kind of defining what it is you need rendered and in a DSL, and like you get it. And I think there's so many pieces to web app development that's repetitive, and it's like, okay, I always have to do this piece.
No, there's definitely a trend, I think, towards kind of this unification of stack and simplification.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I had a couple questions, but if anybody in the audience has questions, just post them in the chat, and I will get around to them. So first of all, I noticed you said right now it doesn't specify any UI. It's only like backend pieces and client side, and the client side script that kind of goes with that, right? Like. So all of the UI aspects, like you build yourself at the moment, right? Other than say the login form. Is there any other like kind of pieces that it will generate for you like that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Wasp is a full stack framework, so it covers both client and server, and you can write your React code. But yeah, we started with you having to write everything by yourself, which is kind of typical for any framework. And now we are slowly starting to add more and more pre-made components for you. So for example, like we started with this authentication, which was a pretty common problem to solve. So I think, one of the next things that we are going to look into is kind of to provide, as much of this kind of CRUD UI as possible for your data models. When you have your task or you have your reflection, we could actually kind of generate, like all the table view, create view, update view, like all the typical stuff that you would usually do manually. That's something that Wasp could easily generate and keep regenerating as you update your data models.
Yeah, absolutely. I would think kind of the admin side of whatever the site is
Exactly.
could easily,
Also, like the admin dashboard. No, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that would be really cool. I mean, it's just another one of those things that I guess developers just, it's don't like spending time on those pieces, right? So because it's just simple stuff. And then, okay, so you use different services. Obviously, wherever you deploy it is going to kind of there's costs associated with that. But like outside of that, I mean, is there any cost associated with using the framework or with anything else currently? I mean, what's the kind of obviously your company like how is this? What's the plan for Wasp as a framework?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, right now everything is free, everything is open source. So we are fully open source. We intend to stay that way. So I mean, since we are still in beta, not 1.0, we don't have any paying products right now. But kind of let's say our monetization plan is very typical for any open source companies. So two main ways would be some kind of hosting deployment solutions, and then on the other side, like possible enterprise features, like more advanced features and similar. So right
Mm.
now we are focusing purely on community, getting the products ready, and just getting that feedback loop going and kind of growing. So that's the focus. But yeah, ultimately, with good adoption and kind of like having Wasp grown in the community, we will be able to add more stuff, especially I think on the deployment and kind of this enterprise feature side.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you said currently it's React. Are you thinking like I'd be able to swap out React for various other frameworks? I'll be able to kind of pick and choose my stack a little bit with in the
Yeah,
future of the
exactly.
framework.
Exactly. Yeah, that is kind of the big vision for Wasp. To be the layer which is not going to lock you into a specific framework. Is it Vue? Is it React? Is it Svelte? Because I think all of these are great, and people should be able to use them without always reinventing everything that goes around with it. So that's our goal. This is also why we built Wasp as a separate configuration language, so it doesn't depend on React, Vue, or something else. I mean, we have
Right.
been playing around, with like running Rust in the backend, running Python scripts in the backend. So I think like there is kind of potential both on the client and server side for having multiple kind of targets.
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea has been going around a little bit. Like, your implementation is very different from what I've seen before. But like, there was even I'm blanking on the name of the frame. Oh, Redwood JS, kind of
Redwood,
like it's
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, similar kind of thing. Like it's like okay, all these pieces that you have to repeat that have gotten really complicated, especially with developers having to learn like okay I got to learn how to build the auth with all these different services and how to build interact with the
Yeah.
database yeah so
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah really cool so what are some of the things like you said this week is your release week was TypeScript support kind of one of the release features? I mean, is there anything else you can share with us that
Oh yeah,
like
I mean there is a bunch of stuff that we have out. I will just actually quickly check out the logs so I can share the most exciting stuff. Is
yeah
is my is my screen still being shared?
yep I can
Okay,
put it back
okay,
up.
awesome. So I can actually just show the cool stuff. So TypeScript we actually released in with beta, but it was just one of the most sought after features. So this is why I highlighted it, because first it was just JavaScript, everybody wanted TypeScript, and now they have it. So that was kind of a huge win for the community. So I mean, right now, I think the one of the big features was just what's here. So we added support for WebSockets. So right now there is native support for WebSockets in Wasp. We also added a lot of more CRUD stuff, which you were mentioning. So right now it's not about UI, but it's about generating your logic. For example, when you have your entity for tasks, we can get you like all the typical CRUD logic functions done for you. It's still experimental, so not working for all the cases, but that's something that is saving a lot of time. So we called it auto CRUD, because automatically does the CRUD for you. So
Mhm.
that's one thing. WebSockets, okay, just community, and finally on Friday, that's going to be a big one. It's going to be Wasp plus GPT. So stay tuned for that. As I was mentioning, like Wasp is naturally a very good target for GPT because it's short, declarative. So it kind of just uses the whole context much more than other typical code, right? So we have been
Mhm.
playing around with it, and it works surprisingly well. So we are going to release like an easy way for you to kickstart your Wasp application with GPT.
Oh, really cool. Okay, so this is going to be
Yeah,
something like just I just kind of describe what it is I want Wasp to build me and
exactly.
give me a starter.
Yep,
Nice.
yep.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I definitely am interested in checking this out because I mean I'm one of those like who feels like things got complicated when you were describing in the beginning about how
Yeah, yeah.
how you kind of I'll put it this way. I always felt like for instance with React, it's like I know how to do web development. I've been doing web development for like 20 something years, um but I don't always know how to do web development the React way.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I feel like I'm constantly having to kind of relearn things myself just to be like, okay, this is the way it should be done in React. Another funny thing that struck me, just as a total aside, speaking of being in this industry for a long, long time, and you see like patterns. Probably about 20 years ago, a friend and I were talking, and he basically had built himself something like this, but we didn't have like React and all that stuff back then. But
Yeah,
essentially, he said he had basically a whole DSL. He showed it to me, like he'd just describe out his app and it would do
amazing.
all this stuff for it. So it's like, everything comes back around.
It is, it is.
And
No, it's very funny you say it. We actually kind of quite often we meet people who are, like on the side building their own version of us. Like, yeah,
yeah,
and they say like, I'm so, this so resonates well with me. I was doing something on the side. It never grew so big, but I actually had a similar idea, and then they show it to us. So no, I think it's very cool to be a couple of people even join the team on that premises and similar. So I think it's the old idea. It's not a new idea, but like it's we made it into this time, right? Yeah,
exactly. And looking back like 20 years ago, things weren't that complicated, right? Like, so I think,
exactly,
it wasn't, the need for it wasn't as dire, right? Like, I think now this is the kind of thing that developers need just because of the growing complexity.
exactly. Yeah, like for ourselves, like Ruby on Rails was the golden era of web development. When kind of there was no yet like rich SPA and similar. Everything was kind of monolithic. You had everything on the server, no state on all the sides. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the experience we are trying to recreate with Wasp right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when Rails came out, it was like, totally revolutionary.
Yeah, yeah,
So, granted, when I started developing, I literally had as an example, I had one screen size we developed for it because like everybody had the same size monitor.
yeah.
So yeah, it made life easy.